The Galactic Council was the oldest and most respected gathering in the known galaxy. Its tall marble halls stretched across the capital world of Ruvan, where statues of past leaders stood as symbols of wisdom and power. For centuries, the Council had brought many species together, shaping laws, trade, and peace. They believed themselves wise, fair, and strong. When humans were admitted to the Council, many thought it was a mistake. The humans were newcomers to the stars. Their homeworld was still scarred by old wars, their history filled with conflicts, and their bodies looked fragile compared to stronger alien races. Yet the humans had arrived with energy, curiosity, and a spirit that was hard to deny. Still, the Council saw them as children among giants. Elder Varan, one of the most powerful voices in the chamber, often spoke of this. He was tall, his skin dark green with silver markings, and he carried himself with great pride. "These humans," he declared during one session, "have much to learn. They leap forward too quickly without wisdom or patience. We are the guardians of the galaxy's order, and we must not let their reckless ways harm what we have built." Many around the chamber agreed. Laughter rippled through the room whenever humans tried to share ideas. The humans brought new designs for starships, methods to improve food growth, and strategies to protect trade lanes. But most of the proposals were dismissed. The Council listened with polite smiles, then cast the ideas aside. The human ambassador, Paul, often stood in the center of the chamber with quiet patience. He was not tall, not powerful-looking, but his voice carried calm strength. He spoke with respect, offering knowledge without arrogance. Yet the more he spoke, the more some council members grew annoyed. They did not like the idea of humans teaching them anything. One day, during a grand gathering with thousands of delegates present, the insults reached their peak. Paul stood with his datapad, presenting a plan to secure the border systems from rising pirate raids. His voice was steady, explaining how humans could share patrol routes and provide small but effective defense fleets. Before he could finish, Elder Varan interrupted. His booming voice filled the chamber. "Humans think they are saviors now? You are still crawling from your own homeworld's dirt. You fight among yourselves, and yet you lecture us. You live such short lives, barely a blink in our history, and you believe you can guide the stars. It is laughable." The chamber erupted with cruel laughter. Delegates from other species joined in, clapping their hands or clicking their mandibles. Some repeated the insult, calling humans reckless, weak, or impatient. Paul did not argue back. He did not raise his voice. He closed his datapad and looked around the vast hall. His eyes met the crowd, calm but cold. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with a slow nod, he returned to his seat. The chamber grew quieter, waiting for a response, but he gave none. Later, in private halls, some whispered uneasily. A few younger delegates felt the council had gone too far. "Why humiliate them so openly?" one asked. But most dismissed the worry. "They will stay," another answered. "Humans are stubborn. They need us more than we need them." What none of them realized was that the humans had already made their decision. That night, messages were sent quietly between human ships, stations, and colonies. Without speeches, without protests, preparations began. Fleets left their docks. Settlements pulled out their trade. Human ambassadors closed their offices one by one. There were no threats, no loud farewells, no demands. When dawn rose on the council capital, the human delegation chamber stood empty. Their banners were gone, their seats abandoned. The message was clear. The humans had left. At first, the council reacted with scorn. "Good riddance," Elder Varan said with a sneer. "Let them sulk in their small corner of space. The council does not need them." Many agreed, clapping their hands in support. They believed humanity's silence was weakness, but there were a few who did not join the celebration. They remembered Paul's calm gaze. They remembered how he had listened more than he had spoken, and they wondered what it meant that a whole species could leave without a word. The marble halls still gleamed. The statues still stood tall. The council still believed itself wise, strong, and untouchable. Yet beyond the edges of their empire, in the quiet dark of space, humanity was moving. And the galaxy would one day learn that silence from humans was not weakness. It was warning. The great chamber of the Galactic Council was alive with noise. Voices of many species filled the air, each speaking in its own tone, some deep and rumbling, others high and sharp. The hall stretched wide, with shining walls of silver and gold. and in the very center stood the circle where ambassadors presented their words. On that day, the human ambassador Paul stood once again in the center. He carried a datapad in his hand, calm as always. His face showed no fear, no anger, only steady focus. He had come to share a plan, one built from careful study and long hours of work. Pirate attacks had been rising along the outer trade routes. Small colonies and merchant ships were being hunted, and fear was spreading in the border systems. Paul had prepared a design for joint patrols, simple and effective, using both human ships and those of the Council. His voice was clear, steady, and respectful. If we share our patrol routes, he explained, we can cover twice the ground. Humans are willing to station our ships along the weaker trade lines. We ask for no payment, only partnership. This way, no system will feel abandoned. Some in the chamber listened with interest. A few even leaned forward, nodding slightly. But others began to whisper and chuckle. Elder Vuran, seated on his high throne-like chair, tapped his clawed hand against the table, his silver markings shining under the bright lights. His eyes narrowed as Paul continued. Paul showed images of the border systems, trade maps, and possible patrol schedules. He spoke with precision, showing respect to every species involved. But before he could finish, Elder Vuran rose to his full height. Enough, Vuran said, his voice echoing like thunder through the chamber. We have heard enough of human dreams. The chamber fell quiet for a moment. All eyes turned to the elder. Paul lowered his datapad slightly but said nothing. Vuran stepped forward, his towering frame making him look like a giant above the smaller species. His green skin glistened in the light as he raised one long arm toward Paul. You humans, he said, his voice full of scorn, arrived at our doors not long ago, begging for a place among us. You fight among yourselves even on your own homeworld. Your wars nearly destroyed your planet, and yet here you stand, daring to lecture us on security and order. A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber. Some delegates tapped their tables in agreement, while others whispered cruel remarks. Vuran's voice grew sharper. You live short lives, barely a blink in our history. You rush into everything, never stopping to think. You are reckless children, unfit to guide even your own kind, let alone this council. And now you believe you can protect our trade routes? It is a joke. The chamber erupted in louder laughter. Some clapped their hands. Others banged the floor with their staffs. Even delegates who once looked curious now joined the mockery, not wanting to stand apart. The noise rolled like a wave through the vast hall. Paul stood still. He did not argue, did not shout. His eyes moved slowly across the chamber, watching the delegates who laughed, watching the ones who looked away in shame, and watching Vuran who stood tall in pride. He closed his datapad. The light from its screen faded. He gave a small nod, neither angry nor broken, only calm. Then he turned and walked back toward the human seats at the edge of the circle. The laughter continued even as he sat down. For the rest of the session, Paul spoke no more. Later, as the chamber emptied, a few younger delegates whispered among themselves. One, a thin creature with golden eyes, said softly, "They went too far today." Another replied, "Perhaps, but the humans will stay. They have no choice." Where else would they go? Yet when Paul left the chamber that evening, his steps were measured, his face unreadable. Behind his calm silence lay decisions already forming. That night, the human delegation met in private. No raised voices, no arguments. Their talks were short and quiet. Messages were sent out to every human ship, every outpost, and every settlement. Orders spread quickly, carried by trusted hands and secure lines. By dawn, preparations were complete. Human ships began to leave the docks one by one. Cargo was packed, offices closed, and banners removed from council halls. They left no message, no protest, no warning, only silence. When the council gathered the next morning, the human seats stood empty. Elder Vuran laughed when he saw the vacant chairs. "Let them sulk," he said. "They will return soon enough, begging to be welcomed back." But not all were so sure. Some remembered the look in Paul's eyes. It was not defeat nor anger. It was something else, something steady, something dangerous. The council, proud and blind, dismissed the absence as weakness. They did not yet see that humanity's silence was not surrender. It was the first step of something far greater. The council chamber felt strange without the humans. Their seats, once filled with quiet presence, now stood empty like a wound no one wished to notice. For a few days, the other delegates ignored it. They spoke louder as if to cover the silence. They told themselves it was nothing, only a childish act of pride from a young species. Elder Vuran was the loudest voice of all. "They left because they are weak," he said with a wave of his hand. "They cannot endure even simple words of truth. Let them hide in their corner of space. The galaxy will continue without them." His supporters cheered, yet not all were convinced. Small signs began to appear. On the first week, merchant guilds complained about delayed shipments. Human cargo ships had vanished from the routes, leaving many worlds short of supplies. A delegate from the farming planet Helna stood in the chamber, her voice sharp with worry. "Our food machines run on human-designed systems. Without their engineers, we cannot keep them working. Already our harvest is failing," the council dismissed her. "You will adapt," Varan said. "Find another solution. Do not rely on a fragile species." But whispers grew in the hallways outside the chamber. The humans had been gone only days, and already cracks showed in the galaxy's order. 2 weeks later, more complaints arrived. Medicines once provided by humans were missing. Colonies on the edge of the council's reach reported sickness spreading fast. Their own doctors could not keep up. "Send aid," they begged, "or we will lose entire settlements." But the council had no medicine to send. The formulas had been human, the factories run by human workers. Without them, sickness spread unchecked. Trade ships moved slower now. Pirates, sensing weakness, began to strike more often. They raided unprotected routes, stealing food, metal, and fuel. Some colonies tried to fight back, but their defenses were too weak. Many had depended on human patrols to guard the space around them. Inside the chamber, arguments broke out. Some demanded the humans be called back, their insults taken back, and new peace offered. Others stood with Vuran, insisting the council could not lower itself to beg from a species they had once mocked. "Are we not the guardians of the galaxy?" Vuran thundered. "We cannot crawl after them. To do so would be shameful." But shame was already creeping into the halls. Ambassadors who once laughed at Paul now kept silent, their eyes lowered. They remembered his calm nod, his steady silence before leaving. They began to wonder if his silence had been a choice, not weakness. By the third week, riots began on some worlds. Colonies that depended on human trade grew angry. They shouted in their streets, blaming the council for driving away the very people who had supported them. Some threatened to leave the council entirely if aid did not come. The council tried to hide the truth, but fear traveled fast. Rumors spread across the stars. Some whispered that the humans had taken their knowledge with them, building something greater in secret. Others claimed human fleets were gathering beyond the borders, waiting for the right moment to return. Delegates argued day and night. Words turned to shouting, shouting turned to threats. The once proud chamber of wisdom became a hall of noise and anger. One quiet morning, a young delegate named Aaron spoke words that cut through the noise. "Look at the empty seat," he said, pointing to the human place in the chamber. "We thought they needed us. But it is clear, we were the ones who needed them. Without humans, the council is weaker than it has ever been." His words fell heavy across the hall. For a moment, no one spoke. Even Vuran sat silent, his silver-marked face hard with anger but showing a shadow of doubt. Outside the chamber, messages were already being sent across the void. Pleas for humans to return, for Paul to come back, for trade to be restored. But no answers came. Every call was met with silence. The humans were gone. Truly gone, and the council was left to face the truth of their absence. The empty seat in the chamber became more than a chair. It became a symbol of pride turned to mistake. It reminded every delegate that a people once mocked and insulted had chosen to walk away. It reminded them that silence could be sharper than any weapon. As the days stretched on, the fear in the galaxy grew. If this was only the beginning, what would come next? The galaxy grew restless. Weeks had turned into months since the humans left, and the silence of their absence spread like a shadow across every star system. At first, the council had tried to dismiss the problem, saying that humanity's departure was nothing more than a passing storm. But storms can be endured. This was something different. This was collapse. On the trade routes, chaos ruled. Human freighters had once carried food, medicine, and vital supplies between worlds. Now, without their presence, shipments slowed, shortages grew, and prices rose. Merchants filled their pockets while colonies starved. Some worlds that had once thrived now stood on the edge of ruin. Pirates were the first to take advantage. They swarmed across the outer systems, attacking ships that had no protection. Their vessels were fast and ruthless. preying on traders who had grown used to safe skies. Human patrols had once kept them at bay, but without those watchful eyes, the pirates grew bold. One such attack came on the colony of Thessa, a small mining world on the border. A fleet of raiders descended without warning, stripping the planet's warehouses, capturing ships, and leaving its people terrified. When Thessa sent pleas for help to the council, they waited days for a reply. By the time a small defense squad arrived, the raiders were long gone. The failure spread anger. Colonists cried out against the council, accusing them of arrogance and blindness. Protests filled the streets. Banners were raised demanding the return of human patrols, demanding that the insult against humanity be undone. Inside the council chamber, the noise was no less fierce. Delegates shouted at one another, blaming each other for the spreading chaos. Some demanded that envoys be sent to beg the humans to return. Others shouted that the council must stand proud and never bow. Elder Varan led this second voice, his words sharp and stubborn. They abandoned us, he declared, his green form towering in the center. They left without honor. If we crawl back to them now, we admit weakness. The council does not beg. But for the first time, his words did not bring cheers. Instead, silence followed. Many delegates looked away. They remembered the growing riots on their own worlds, the cries of their people, the hunger spreading through their streets. Pride was becoming too heavy to carry. Some tried to send secret messages. A delegate from Helna, desperate to save her failing farms, hired private ships to carry pleas toward human space. A guild leader from the trade world of Orvan offered riches if humans would return their freighters to the roots. None received an answer. The silence was complete, and still the crisis deepened. Diseases began to spread across the inner colonies. Human medicine, once taken for granted, was gone. Their doctors had left, their machines no longer hummed in hospitals. Entire cities suffered without the cures that only humans had provided. Local healers tried their best, but their efforts were too small. Fear and anger grew with every passing day. The council tried to act. They sent fleets to patrol the outer systems, but their warships were too large, too slow. They could not move like the smaller human corvettes that once darted between trade lanes. Pirates slipped past them with ease. Delegates whispered to one another in dark corners of the hall. "We mocked them," one said quietly. "And now the galaxy mocks us." Another replied, "Perhaps they will never return. Perhaps we have already lost them forever." The council's pride, once its greatest strength, was now its greatest weakness. They had insulted a people who asked only for respect, and now the cost was falling on every world under their rule. One night, in the quiet of his private chamber, Elder Varan stood before a star map. His eyes traced the border where the humans had once lived. It was empty now, silent and cold. Yet reports spoke of strange movements, of ships seen in the dark, of colonies hidden beyond the council's reach. He frowned but pushed the thought aside. To admit fear was to admit mistake, and Voran would not do so. But outside, beyond the maps and borders, humanity was not idle. They were watching, waiting, and building. And as the council struggled to hold its empire together, a quiet truth spread across the stars. The galaxy needed humans more than humans ever needed the galaxy. The crisis was no longer a storm to be endured. It was the beginning of something greater, something the council could not yet see, and when the silence broke, it would change the galaxy forever. Months had passed since humanity left the council without a word. The galaxy was in disorder. Supply lines were failing, colonies were struggling, and the council's pride had turned into fear. Still, no human ships had returned. For the council, it seemed impossible that a species they had insulted could be so strong yet so silent. But humanity was not idle. On the edge of the galaxy, beyond the borders of known space, humans had gathered. They built massive stations in orbit around uninhabited planets. They improved their starships faster and stronger than before. Their engineers designed machines that could outmatch any council technology. Every move was planned, every action deliberate. Paul, the human ambassador who had been mocked by Elder Varan, now oversaw the operations. He walked among his people with calm authority. Though he was not a warrior by nature, he had learned to command fleets, to understand strategy, and to prepare for every possibility. The humans listened because he did not demand respect with words. He earned it through action. In one station, engineers worked in harmony, creating energy shields that could withstand massive attacks. Scientists developed medical machines that could heal entire colonies quickly. Even their ships, built for speed and endurance, were quiet and efficient. Humanity was preparing, not for revenge, but for a galaxy that had underestimated them. Rumors of these activities began to reach the outer worlds. Scouts from the Council reported seeing strange human movements far beyond their borders. Fleets that had once seemed small were now large and perfectly organized. Some delegates whispered in the council halls that humans were forming alliances with species that the council had ignored. These allies, once considered weak or insignificant, were now part of a network that stretched quietly across hidden systems. Inside the council chamber, tension grew. Elder Vuran refused to believe the warnings, calling them lies or exaggerations. Yet a quiet fear lingered among the younger delegates. They remembered the calm eyes of Paul, the way humans had left without protest or argument. It had been silent but deliberate. It had been a choice. A young delegate named Aaron spoke softly during a session. The humans are not gone because they are weak. They left because they are strong. We have insulted them, and yet they do not fight us openly. They are gathering, preparing, waiting for a moment we cannot imagine. His words made some shiver, though Vuran dismissed him. On hidden planets, humanity built networks for communication and transport that the Council could not detect. They trained pilots and strategists, creating fleets capable of defending any world or reclaiming lost territories. Every human knew the value of patience and precision. They remembered how the Council had mocked them, how Elder Vuran had insulted their intelligence. They had not forgotten, but they waited, using the Council's pride against them. Meanwhile, some Council delegates began to worry. Reports came of ships that moved faster than anything in the Council fleet. Messages spoke of planets where humans had quietly improved local defenses and medicine. Trade routes that had been lost were now carefully monitored by humans. Though the Council had no knowledge of it, the galaxy was learning a quiet lesson. Humans were not fragile, reckless, or weak. They were patient, careful, and clever beyond what most species had imagined. Even in their absence, humanity had made the Council dependent. Without human technology and medicine, the galaxy was struggling. Without human strategies, pirates attacked freely. Without human patience, colonies were failing. The Council had believed that humans needed them. The truth was the opposite. Paul knew this well. He stood in the command center of one hidden station, watching star maps of the galaxy. "They still think we are weak," he said to his officers. "They still think we need them. Let them remain proud. Pride will blind them when the time comes." The humans worked quietly without celebration. Every ship repaired, every machine tested, every strategy prepared for the day they might return. They did not boast, they did not call for revenge, yet the strength of their actions spoke louder than any words. And far away, inside the council halls, tension and fear grew. The empty human seats were no longer just empty chairs. They were a warning. A reminder that a species once scorned could be far stronger than anyone imagined. The galaxy was about to learn that the hidden strength of humanity was not in loud speeches or flashy displays. It was in patience, in preparation, and in a quiet intelligence that no council member had taken seriously. The council's capital world shone under 3 suns, but the light could not chase away the fear growing among the delegates. Weeks of shortages, attacks, and failures had left the once proud leaders restless. Their pride had been their strength, yet now it only reminded them of their mistakes. Then the first reports arrived. Human ships, hundreds of them, were appearing at the edge of council space. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls shining with a quiet strength, faster and more powerful than anything the council had ever built. Scouts tried to intercept them, but the humans moved with precision, avoiding conflict and observing the council silently. Inside the chamber, panic began to spread. Elder Vuran banged his staff on the table, demanding answers. "Explain this immediately. How could they appear without warning?" Delegates shouted in fear and confusion. Many had not seen such a fleet in decades. Their pride faltered, replaced by dread. Paul, once the silent ambassador, now commanded the fleet. He stood on the bridge of the flagship, calm and focused, observing the council worlds. His people were ready for any action, but their goal was clear. They did not seek to destroy. They sought to show the council the cost of pride and the value of respect. The council attempted to communicate. Holographic messages flashed across space, begging the humans to stop, to negotiate, to explain their purpose. Paul did not reply. His fleet moved steadily, blocking key trade routes and silently demonstrating that the galaxy had shifted. The humans had returned, but on their own terms. Across the council world, citizens watched the fleet appear in the skies. The sight inspired awe and fear. Children pointed at the ships, whispering stories of a species that had vanished and returned stronger than any other. Leaders on remote colonies realized the humans had been preparing while they had mocked them. Humanity had quietly built a network of strength that no one had expected. Inside the council chamber, arguments turned to panic. Some delegates suggested surrender. Others wanted war. Elder Vuran refused to accept either. He could not admit the council had been wrong. They will not attack, he insisted, though even he did not fully believe it. They are showing off, testing us. Meanwhile, Paul's fleet began to secure key points in the galaxy, restoring order where chaos had spread. Human engineers rebuilt damaged stations, repaired freighters, and restored trade routes. Medicine arrived on planets where sickness had taken hold. For the first time in months, hope returned to the citizens, though the council itself still struggled to accept the lesson. The humans communicated not through threats, but through action. Every rescue, every repaired system, every act of aid reminded the council and the galaxy that humanity's strength was not in pride or aggression. It was in skill, intelligence, and foresight. A private message finally reached the council leaders. Paul's hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. His face was calm, his eyes steady. "We offered friendship and partnership," he said. "You mocked us. You insulted our people. You believed we were weak. We have returned to show that underestimation has a cost. The galaxy can survive without humans, but it is much weaker without our presence." The chamber fell silent. Some delegates bowed their heads in shame. Others could not speak, overwhelmed by the truth. Elder Vuran's face was hard, his pride refusing to admit defeat. Yet even he could not ignore the warning in Paul's words. Paul's fleet remained in orbit, not as conquerors, but as guardians. They restored order where the council had failed. They did not enslave or destroy, but they made the council understand that their empire had been fragile without human knowledge and skill. In every system, humanity's return became a story of strength, patience, and wisdom. Citizens of the galaxy saw a species that had been mocked, insulted, and ignored rise to demonstrate their value without violence. The council had learned a lesson too late, but it was clear. Humanity's return was not about revenge. It was about respect, strategy, and proof that underestimating them came at a high price. Paul looked across the stars from the bridge of his flagship. The humans had returned, not to rule, but to remind the galaxy of their quiet power. And as the council faced the consequences of their pride, the citizens of every world began to see that humanity was not just a part of the galaxy. They were a force to be respected, and a species whose actions spoke louder than any words could. The council had never known fear like this. For centuries they had ruled the galaxy with pride, convinced that their wisdom and strength were unmatched. Yet now, after humanity's return, that pride had crumbled. Every decision, every insult, every dismissal of the humans had left them vulnerable. Paul's fleet remained in orbit above the capital world, not moving with aggression but with control. Ships were positioned to prevent any sudden attacks from the council. Trade routes were secured by human patrols, and systems once failing were restored. The citizens of the galaxy began to see clearly that the humans had been the quiet guardians all along. Inside the council chamber, panic reigned. Delegates shouted, argued, and blamed each other. Some wanted to fight, but no one could find the courage to challenge the human fleet. Elder Vuran, once loud and proud, now sat in silence. His staff rested on the floor, his shoulders heavy. Even he could not deny the truth. Paul appeared in the chamber through a holographic projection. His calm voice filled the hall, carrying authority and clarity. "We came to offer friendship," he said. "You refused. You insulted our people. You believed us weak. Now the galaxy suffers because of your pride. It does not have to end in destruction, but it must end in respect." Silence followed his words. Every delegate felt the weight of responsibility. They realized that the humans had not returned to fight or destroy. They had returned to correct the balance, to restore order, and to make the council see the consequences of underestimating a species they had mocked. The citizens of the capital world began to notice changes. Trade resumed smoothly. Hospitals and medical facilities repaired by human engineers offered care for all. Food reached colonies that had been starving for months. Pirates were no longer able to strike freely, as human patrols monitored the outer systems. Slowly, life returned to normal, but under a new understanding. Humanity had returned to show that the galaxy was not as strong as it had believed without them. Elder Varan finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant. "We have been blind," he admitted, though his pride struggled against the words. "We insulted a people who never sought conflict. We mocked their patience and skill. We are weaker because of our arrogance." Paul's hologram did not gloat. He simply nodded. "Recognition is the first step. The Council can remain, but it must respect every species, every voice, and every effort. Humanity does not seek to rule by force, but we will ensure that no one underestimates us again." The Council slowly began to act. Systems that had been left unprotected were restored under human guidance. Colonies received aid and trade resumed under careful monitoring. Delegates who had once laughed at humans were now forced to acknowledge their value. Across the galaxy, the story spread. Humanity had returned not to conquer, but to correct. They had shown that intelligence, patience, and preparation were stronger than arrogance and mockery. Species that had once believed humans fragile now sought their guidance. Citizens of many worlds admired the quiet strength of a species that had been insulted and ignored, yet had risen to restore balance without violence. Paul stood on the bridge of his flagship looking at the stars. The galaxy was not fully at peace, but the lessons were clear. The Council had paid the price for their pride, not with destruction, but with the realization that they were not the center of the universe. Humanity's quiet patience had reshaped the power of the galaxy. The empty chairs of the human delegation were no longer empty. They had returned with presence not as conquerors, but as equals who demanded respect. The Council's mistakes had been costly, yet they were also an opportunity for growth. Every world now knew that humanity's strength was not in brute force or loud speeches. It was in intelligence, unity, and a calm, steady determination that could not be ignored. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would last for generations: insult humanity, and the consequences will be seen not in words, but in the quiet, unstoppable actions of a species underestimated at every turn. And so, the Council paid the price for their arrogance, but the galaxy itself became stronger because humanity had returned. Peace and respect were restored, and every species learned to honor the quiet, patient power of humans.